911, what's your emergency?
We've been robbed.
Okay, stay on the line.
Okay.
Is anyone hurt?
No. The guy walked out with, I don't know how much cash in a bag. He had a bomb or something wrapped around his neck.
In the tranquil suburban idyll of Erie, Pennsylvania, an unprecedented crime rattled the peaceful monotony in August 2003. A pizza delivery man with a live bomb fastened around his neck horrifyingly turned from an ordinary man into an unwitting pawn in a lethal game of greed and manipulation. This bizarre, chilling and bewildering case, known infamously as the Collar Bomb Heist, masterminded an orchestral drama of high-stakes bank robbery, a homemade explosive device, a complex scavenger hunt, and a mind-boggling enigma that has perplexed law enforcement agencies for decades. Let's embark on a dark journey into this labyrinth of deceit, where every clue uncovers a new layer of intrigue, every witness conceals a tale of deception, and every answer breeds more questions. On the quiet fringes of Erie, Pennsylvania, lived Brian Wells, a 46-year-old man leading a quiet, ordinary life with his 3 cats. Although he was shy around people, he displayed liveliness when interacting with animals. Despite his introverted nature, he was known among his neighbors for his politeness and friendliness. He worked at Mamma Mia's pizzeria, delivering pies to the residents of his small town. Wells was known as a reliable, hard-working individual. His 30-minute guaranteed delivery routine barely stirred a ripple in the otherwise calm waters of his life. With no known ties to criminal activities, it was hard to imagine how he would soon be entangled in a web of crime that was anything but ordinary. One afternoon, around 1:30 p.m., Mamma Mia's pizzeria received a call that stood out from the others. The caller asked for 2 small pizzas to be delivered not to a home or an office, but to a remote TV transmission tower on the outskirts of town. With a sense of unease, the employees exchanged glances. But business was business, and Wells, ever the reliable worker, agreed to take the delivery himself, even though he was at the end of his shift. Wells set off for the delivery, unaware that this would be his last. After arriving at the desolate tower, witnesses saw Wells stepping out of his car and talking to a group of individuals before suddenly disappearing from view. Moments later, he reappeared, but this time with a strange device strapped around his neck. The device was bulky, mechanical, and chillingly ominous. It was a collar bomb, and Wells was its reluctant wearer. At 2:28 p.m., Wells walked into a PNC bank. He had a short cane in his right hand and a strange bulge under his t-shirt. Wells passed the teller a note. Gather employees with access codes to vault and work fast to fill bag with $250,000, it said. You have only 15 minutes. Then he lifted his shirt to reveal the heavy box-like bomb dangling from his neck. Wells's behavior during the heist was unsettling. He remained calm, almost nonchalant, despite the explosive device around his neck. In a moment that added an extra layer of peculiarity, he even took a dum-dum lollipop from the counter, a bizarre act in such a high-stakes situation. With $8,702 in hand, far less than demanded, but all that was available, Wells left the bank, hopped into his car, and drove off. With the gruesome instructions in hand, Wells began his frantic journey. Driven by the ticking time bomb around his neck, he raced against the clock, following the enigmatic clues to the best of his ability. As he dashed from one location to another, he left a trail of bewildered people in his wake. Witnesses recounted his panic-stricken face and the chilling device around his neck. He didn't get far. Some 15 minutes later, state troopers spotted Wells standing outside his car in a nearby parking lot, surrounded him and tossed him to the pavement, cuffing his hands behind his back. The initial interaction of officers with Wells painted a harrowing picture. Wells told the officers that while out on a delivery, he had been kidnapped by a group of dark-skinned men who chained the bomb around his neck at gunpoint and forced him to rob the bank. Out of sheer desperation, he warned them, "It's gonna go off, I'm not lying." With no idea of how to safely remove the bomb, the authorities cordoned off the area and evacuated nearby civilians. As the minutes ticked away, the bomb squad was summoned. For 25 minutes, Wells remained seated on the pavement, his legs curled beneath him. His demeanor during these tense moments was eerily calm, despite his life hanging in the balance. He maintained that he was an unwilling participant in this scenario, a victim manipulated by unnamed perpetrators. "Did you call my boss?" Wells asked a trooper at one point, apparently concerned that his employer would think he was shirking his duties. As news of the situation spread, local media descended on the scene, broadcasting the standoff live. Viewers across the nation watched, their eyes glued to the screens, as they slowly realized the gravity of the situation. The collar bomb itself was a daunting spectacle, an elaborate device with dials, wires, and a bulky attached locking mechanism. After sitting there for like 25 minutes, suddenly the device started to emit an accelerating beeping noise. Wells fidgeted. It looked like he was trying to scoot backward, to somehow escape the bomb strapped to his neck. The device detonated, killing Wells on the spot. Roughly 3 minutes later, the bomb squad arrived. The immediate reactions of the on-scene police officers and the arriving bomb squad were of horror and disbelief. Forensic teams were quickly mobilized to gather as much evidence as they could from the devastating sight. The media, on the other hand, went into a frenzy. Law enforcement initiated their process of combing through a wealth of physical clues. They stumbled upon a 2-foot-long cane in Wells' car, which unexpectedly proved to be a brilliantly engineered homemade firearm. The bomb, too, was an exceptional example of DIY fabrication and assembly. The apparatus was composed of 2 elements, a metallic collar bound by 3 bands, equipped with 4 keyholes, and a lock requiring a 3-number combination, and an iron casing that housed 2 6-inch pipe bombs filled with double-base smokeless explosive substance. The collar, which functioned on a hinge, secured itself around Wells's neck, akin to a massive manacle. Investigators could tell from their observations that its construction involved the use of expert-level tools. The device also housed 2 Sunbeam kitchen timers and a digital countdown timer. It featured wires that served no purpose, stickers with misleading warnings, and was designed to confuse those trying to disarm it. The device was a perplexing puzzle in itself. When the police eventually got their hands on the handwritten notes Wells had been given, it quickly became clear that this was not a random act of violence, but a calculated plot. The language was cold, direct, and impersonal, making specific demands and threats. Addressed to the bomb hostage, the notes instructed Wells to rob the bank of $250,000, then follow a set of complex instructions to find various keys and combination codes hidden throughout Erie. It contained drawings, threats, and detailed maps. If Wells did as he was told, the instructions promised, he'd end up with the keys and the combination required to free him from the bomb. Failure or disobedience would result in certain death. There is only one way you can survive, and that is to cooperate completely, the notes read in meticulous lettering that would later even challenge handwriting analysis. This powerful, booby-trapped bomb can be removed only by following our instructions. Act now, think later, or you will die. It seemed that whoever planned the robbery had also constructed a nightmarish scavenger hunt for Wells, in which the prize was his life. After Wells was killed, the cops tried completing the hunt themselves. The first note was straightforward enough. Exit the bank with the money and go to the McDonald's restaurant. Get out of the car and go to the small sign reading, "Drive-through." By the sign, in the flower bed, there is a rock with a note taped to the bottom. It has your next instructions. Following his exit from the bank with the bag of money, Wells promptly set his course to the mentioned location. He unearthed a 2-page directive from the flower bed, which guided him along Peach Street towards a wooded area at a distance of few miles, where a container marked with orange tape was supposed to contain the next instructions. Wells was apprehended before he could reach this clue, but the detectives continued the investigation, discovering the orange tape-marked container. Inside it, they found a note leading them 2 miles south to a diminutive road marker, where the subsequent clue was supposed to be stashed in a jar hidden in the neighboring woods. Upon reaching the spot, they indeed discovered the jar, but it was devoid of any content. It seemed as though the instigator of this scavenger hunt had aborted the mission upon the appearance of the law enforcement officers, and likely had been following them every inch of the way. Wells' clothing added another layer of mystery. He was wearing 2 t-shirts. The outer one had a Guess clothing logo. Wells wasn't wearing that shirt at work that morning, and his relatives said it wasn't his. It appeared to be a taunt. Can you guess who is behind this? That was just one of the questions that perplexed investigators. What, for instance, was the purpose of the scavenger hunt? Who was the collar bomber, and why send a hostage hopping around Erie in broad daylight? Why scatter clues in public locations where they might be discovered? How was Wells chosen to be the hostage? For 7 years, the FBI was engaged in a scavenger hunt of its own, one that the collar bomber seemed to have planned as intricately as the one that had ensnared Wells. The only question was whether the feds would get any further than Wells had. The following day, a writer and a photographer from the Erie Times News made their way to the tower. The unpaved path that led to the tower was blocked by officials, but the journalists noticed a tall, broad-shouldered man dressed in denim Carhartt overalls, walking back and forth in front of a house situated adjacent to the tower. The property's backyard stretched nearly up to the base of the transmission tower. The tall man was later identified as Bill Rothstein. At 59 years old, Bill Rothstein was a single handyman who had spent his entire life in the region. His speech was refined and articulate, reflecting someone who deeply valued his proficiency in the English language. Unfazed by the investigative activities transpiring just beyond his property line, Rothstein seemed undisturbed. The reporters, keen to secure a better vantage point of the situation, inquired if Rothstein might guide them through his property. He consented. They ventured into the dense foliage, but their view remained largely obstructed. After a visit lasting approximately 15 minutes at Rothstein's residence, they departed. To the casual observer, Bill Rothstein might have seemed like nothing more than an ordinary homeowner living beside a TV tower. However, it would soon become apparent that he was concealing a sinister secret.
State Police, what's your emergency?
At 8645 Peach Street, in the garage, there is a frozen body. It's in the freezer. There's a woman there you might want to pick up and question.
How do you know that, sir?
Trust me, I know.
Who are you?
I'm the guy who lives there.
What is your name, sir?
Bill Rothstein.
And what is her name?
Marjorie Deal.
Prior to her arrest, Deal Armstrong was already a figure of considerable notoriety in Erie, largely due to her history of deceased romantic partners. Her initial emergence into the public eye occurred in 1984 when she faced charges for the killing of her then-boyfriend Robert Thomas at the age of 35. Asserting that she had fired 6 bullets at him in self-defense, Deal Armstrong was ultimately found not guilty by a jury. Subsequently, in 1988, her spouse, Richard Armstrong, passed away due to a cerebral hemorrhage. Although his death was officially deemed accidental, there remained unresolved questions. In her high school days, Deal Armstrong was recognized by her peers for her extraordinary intelligence, a trait she maintained into adulthood, with an almost encyclopedic grasp of subjects like literature, history, and legal matters. However, as years passed, this intellectual acuity became entangled with mental instability. Court documents indicate that she had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which manifested in severe mood swings and an unceasing rapid stream of speech. A coldly calculated criminal recidivist and serial killer is how a federal magistrate judge, Martin C. Carlson, described her in denying one of her appeals. Her cases, Carlson wrote, were marked by brutality, sadism, cruelty, and the morbid abuse of her victims, both living and dead. Within hours of making the call, Rothstein was in custody. He informed the police that he was in agony for weeks, contemplating taking his own life. He even composed a suicide note, which authorities located in a desk at his residence. Penned in black marker, Rothstein offered his apologies to those who cared for or about me, identified the corpse in his freezer as Jim Roden, and asserted that he did not kill him nor participated in his death. The note commenced with an intriguing caveat. This has nothing to do with the Wells case. Over the next 2 days, Rothstein explained to police how a dead man came to be in his freezer. He narrated how, in mid-August, he had gotten a call from his former girlfriend, Marjorie Deal Armstrong, with whom he had been romantically involved in the 1960s and early 1970s. Deal Armstrong informed him that she had shot her boyfriend James Roden in the back using a 12-gauge shotgun over a monetary dispute. She then requested his assistance in disposing of the body and cleaning up her Erie residence, which was located roughly 10 miles away from Rothstein's own home. Complying with her request, Rothstein stored the body in a freezer within his garage for a span of 5 weeks. He also meticulously melted down the firearm used in the killing and distributed its fragments throughout Erie County. However, Rothstein stated that he couldn't bring himself to dismember the body as initially planned, prompting him to contact 911 out of fear of what Deal Armstrong could potentially do to him. On 21st of September, the day after Rothstein's 911 call, Deal Armstrong was taken into custody for Roden's killing. 16 months later, in January 2005, she entered a plea of guilty but mentally ill, receiving a prison term ranging from 7 to 20 years in a state correctional facility. However, by that juncture, Rothstein was beyond caring about the former girlfriend he had turned over to authorities. He had died of lymphoma in July 2004. The team of federal agents investigating the Collar Bomb mystery hadn't been paying much attention to the Roden murder. For them, it was a local matter and seemed to have nothing to do with their case. However, in April 2005, their perspective shifted when they received a call from a state police officer. This officer had recently spoken with Deal Armstrong concerning a different murder case. Contrary to what Rothstein's suicide note indicated, Deal Armstrong revealed that the Roden murder was closely connected to the Collar Bomb investigation. She offered to disclose all of the details of this case if the authorities would facilitate her transfer from Muncie State Penitentiary to the less restrictive prison in Cambridge Springs, which was closer to Erie. During her series of discussions with federal agents, Deal Armstrong strongly denied any direct involvement in the scheme, but she did confess to knowing about it. She also acknowledged providing the kitchen timers used in the explosive device and disclosed that she was within a mile of the bank when the robbery occurred. Moreover, she contended that Wells, the deceased pizza delivery man, was not merely a victim, but was also complicit in the plot. Rothstein, the individual who reported her for Roden's murder, was also involved, she claimed. According to her, he was actually the mastermind behind the entire operation. While Deal Armstrong accused Rothstein, she was simultaneously implicating herself. In fact, prior to listening to her self-incriminating statements, authorities were already growing suspicious that she might be the one orchestrating the Collar Bomb plot. In the weeks leading up to this, they had consulted with 4 different informants. These sources disclosed that Deal Armstrong had spoken about the crime in great detail. One informant even documented their discussions, capturing Deal Armstrong's claims that she had murdered Roden because he was going to tell about the robbery, and her admission that she had assisted in sizing Wells's neck for the bomb. Then, in late 2005, FBI received another break in the case. A witness came forward to say that an ex-television repairman turned crack dealer named Kenneth Barnes was also involved. Barnes, an old fishing buddy of Deal Armstrong, had spoken too freely about the plan, and his brother-in-law had turned him in. Threatened with the prospect of an extended prison term, Barnes opted for a plea agreement. Barnes validated the federal agent's suspicion that Deal Armstrong was the mastermind of the Collar Bomb scheme. According to him, she needed the cash so that she could pay him to kill her father, who she believed was blowing through his fortune, the money that she expected to inherit. While Barnes admitted he wasn't privy to every detail of the plan, his narrative aligned significantly with the information the investigators had already gathered. On February 10, 2006, federal agents convened another meeting with Diehl Armstrong, who was accompanied by her lawyer. They informed her that they had collected sufficient evidence to indict her. She reacted explosively, pounding her fist on the conference table and unleashing a tirade against both the agents and her own attorney. However, in a follow-up meeting, she consented to a drive around Erie to identify her whereabouts on the day Wells committed the bank robbery. At the end of this tour, where she admitted to being at multiple sites associated with the crime, Diehl Armstrong informed the agents she would disclose no further details unless granted an immunity letter. However, it was already too late. The woman who seemingly couldn't hold her tongue had already divulged too much. In July 2007, nearly reaching the 4-year mark since Wells' demise, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Erie convened a press briefing regarding a significant development in the case. Positioned in front of numerous TV cameras, U.S. Attorney Mary Beth Buchanan declared that the inquiry had concluded. Diehl Armstrong and Barnes were indicted for executing this high-profile crime. Additionally, the indictment brought to light the involvement of other co-conspirators, with Rothstein being one of the named individuals. In a twist to the narrative, Wells was also named as an accomplice. The indictment, which was the culmination of insights from over 1,000 interviews conducted over close to 4 years, suggested that Wells was not an innocent bystander, but a collaborator from the very start. It was revealed that he had willingly agreed to undertake the bank robbery, believing he wore a fake bomb around his neck. He was led to think that the subsequent scavenger hunt was a diversion tactic designed to confuse law enforcement. If ever cornered, he believed he could use the detailed and intimidating instructions as a way to show that he was simply following the orders. But over time, Buchanan described a shift in Wells's involvement. Initially a conspirator, Wells later became an unwilling participant. The supposed decoy bomb was revealed to be authentic. The orchestrated scavenger hunt, previously seen as a diversion, transformed into a genuine life-or-death countdown. Many who followed the case found the government's revelation unsatisfying. It raised as many questions as it provided answers. What was Wells's motive to be involved? Was he aware of the risks? And could Diehl Armstrong, given her mental health challenges, mastermind such a sophisticated crime? These doubts grew when, a week later, it came to light that the FBI deemed the entire scavenger hunt fictitious. The bomb was designed such that any attempt to remove it would set it off. In any case, Wells was destined to die. Diehl Armstrong's trial, which commenced in 2010, promised to clear up the mysteries that had surrounded the Collar Bomb case. On the 5th day of the trial, Ken Barnes testified. By that time, prosecutor Marshall Piccinini had already assembled a strong case. Describing the individuals involved in the Wells plot as twisted, intellectually bright, dysfunctional individuals who outsmarted themselves, Piccinini called Barnes as the star witness. According to Barnes, Wells was lured in by the promise of a big payday, something he was in dire need of. Surprisingly, the seemingly reserved pizza delivery man had a relationship with an escort. Relying on his friend Barnes, he obtained crack, which he subsequently provided to the escort in return for certain services. However, leading up to the robbery, Wells accumulated a substantial debt to his drug suppliers, putting him in a precarious financial situation. It wasn't until the day of the incident, when he was delivering pizzas to that TV broadcast tower, that the reality dawned on him. He'd been deceived, and the bomb was real. In his desperate attempt to flee, he was intercepted, and under the threat of a gun, the explosive was attached around his neck. On October 26, 2010, Diehl Armstrong finally got the opportunity to tell her version of events. She started by ridiculing the prosecutor. "If this is the kind of evidence you have against me, I'm telling you, this is a pitiful case." During her first day on the stand, she mentioned Brian Wells only once. "I never met Brian Wells, and I never knew Brian Wells. Never. I became aware of him the day that he died. I saw it on the news." However, the jury wasn't convinced. After 11 hours of deliberation, the jury found her guilty on all 3 counts: armed bank robbery, conspiracy, and using a destructive device during a violent crime. Like many other cases that I have covered, after thoroughly examining all of the information available on this topic, I am left with a pressing question. Who built the bomb, and what was the intent behind such a grandiose scheme? Was the goal merely financial gain, or did it serve a more complex psychological need? The puzzle suggested a desire for control and a need to demonstrate intellectual superiority. There is no way that D.L. Armstrong planned the Collar Bomb Heist. The profile of the Collar Bomber produced by the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit stated, "It continues to be the opinion of the department that this is much more than a mere bank robbery." The behavior seen in this crime was choreographed by Collar Bomber, watching on the sidelines according to a written script in which he attempted to direct others to do what he wanted them to do. Because of the complex nature of this crime, the BAU believes there were multiple motives for the offender, and money was not the primary one. In essence, the robbery was not the primary objective. The architect of the heist didn't care whether Wells successfully delivered the money or not. His intention was to construct a puzzle, one that would elude interpretation for years ahead and perpetually engage law enforcement and investigators in a futile search for clues. To me, this doesn't seem typical of D.L. Armstrong, whom prosecutors believed planned the whole event to steal enough money for funding a hitman to kill her father. But you will ask, if not her, then who set this plan in motion? To answer this, we'll have to turn back to the FBI's profile, which stated that the bomb builder was comfortable around a wide variety of power tools and shop machines. He was a frugal person who saved scraps of sundry materials in order to reuse them in various projects. And he was the type of person who takes pride in building a variety of things. To me, that sounds like a description of Bill Rothstein. The handyman possessed the expertise to create such a complex explosive device. From my perspective, Rothstein played games with the investigators right off the bat, setting up that scavenger hunt, not just for fun, but to throw them off, wasting crucial hours in the days that immediately followed the heist. And let's not forget the 911 call. By pointing the finger at D.L. Armstrong concerning the Rodin murder, Rothstein cleverly crafted the narrative of the Wells case to his advantage. Rothstein ensured that he wasn't the one being sold out, all the while feigning complete cluelessness about the collar bomb scenario. In his closing arguments at D.L. Armstrong's trial, the DA described the crime as a ludicrous, overwrought, overworked, desperately failed plan. If the endgame was simply to grab some cash, then that interpretation seems quite accurate. But I think it wasn't only about the money. Rothstein, whose life was largely unremarkable, wanted to prove his brilliance and sought to etch his name in history by orchestrating a crime that wouldn't just seize global headlines, but also keep the authorities scratching their heads for ages. As retired FBI agent Jim Fisher said, "He died with all of the secrets. He died taking all the answers with him. He gets the last laugh in that sense. He escaped punishment. He escaped detection. He left us with these idiots and a bunch of questions." To conclude this, I would say that these lingering questions serve as a reminder of Rothstein's ultimate final victory. And the final piece of the scavenger puzzle, the clue holding the answers that the FBI tirelessly sought, will forever remain hidden. So, what do you guys think? Who planned the Collar Bomb heist and why?